The void split open above Hydrax Prime, a wound in reality that bled crimson light across the night sky. Billions watched as something fell from that cosmic tear, trailing fire like a meteor. Imperial Vox channels crackled with panic. Orbital defense platforms locked targeting arrays. The planetary defense force mobilized with practiced efficiency, born from generations of vigilance against Xenos raids. Governor Talius stood on his palace balcony, magnoculars pressed to his eyes, tracking the anomaly as it slowed its descent. Not debris then, not a natural phenomenon. The object changed course, demonstrating purpose, intellect. "My lord," his seneschal whispered, "the astropaths report disturbance in the warp. Something is coming through." Talius nodded grimly. "Alert the Astra Militarum garrison, prepare evacuation protocols for the upper hive spires, and send word to..." The figure resolved in the sky before him, hovering impossibly without thrust or visible means of flight. A man, or something resembling one, broad-shouldered, clad in blue with a crimson cape billowing behind him despite the absence of wind. Upon his chest, a stylized symbol that resembled no imperial heraldry Talius had ever witnessed. "Your world faces grave danger." The figure spoke, his voice carrying impossibly across the distance without Vox amplification. "I am Kal-El. I come to help." As if summoned by his words, the orbital auger arrays blared warnings. A Xenos fleet had translated from the warp at the system's edge. Tyranids, the first tendrils of a hive fleet probing Imperial defenses. Within the governor's command bunker, tactical hololiths flickered with incoming data. The Xenos vessels moved with terrible purpose, bioships propelled by eldritch means beyond Imperial comprehension. Voidcraft swarmed from their carapaced hulls, mycetic spores already burning through atmosphere toward population centers. "Estimated civilian casualties?" Governor Talius asked, his voice steady despite the horror unfolding before him. The tactician, a veteran of 3 previous campaigns, replied without emotion. "Conservative estimate places initial casualties at 30 million, my lord. The outer agricultural zones will be overrun within hours, the hive cities themselves within days unless the Navy can establish void superiority. And what of our mysterious visitor?" As if in answer, the tactical displays blurred with movement. Something impossibly fast intercepted the first wave of mycetic spores. The blue and red figure tore through their ranks like an avenging angel, each impact detonating the biological pods before they could deliver their lethal cargo to the surface. In the upper atmosphere, Kal-El worked methodically, his eyes projecting beams of intense heat that scoured the alien vessels from existence. Where his fists connected with the larger spores, they detonated in spectacular fashion, raining harmless organic debris rather than ravening hordes of gene-stealers and gaunts. Governor Talius watched in silence as the mysterious being single-handedly accomplished what would have required an entire Imperial Navy battle group. When the last of the initial wave had been destroyed, the figure descended to the governor's palace, landing with impossible grace upon the marble flagstones. "Your world is temporarily safe," Kal-El said, his voice resonant with authority yet tempered by something the governor had rarely encountered in his decades of Imperial service. "Compassion. But they will send more. I can help prepare your defenses." Talius studied the being before him, humanoid, yet clearly not human, too perfect, too powerful. In the Imperium, such divergence from humanity inevitably spelled either alien deception or warp corruption. "What manner of being are you?" Talius demanded, his hand resting upon his ceremonial bolt pistol. "Speak truthfully, for the Emperor's light reveals all falsehoods." "I am Kal-El, last son of Krypton. My world died long ago, in another realm of existence. I was sent here through means I don't fully understand, but I know my purpose remains unchanged. To protect life, to stand against darkness." Before Talius could respond, the palace trembled. Through the armored viewing ports, they witnessed the sky darkening again, not with night, but with the vast shadow of a much larger bioship entering low orbit. This was no mere scouting force. The main Tyranid invasion had begun. "Emperor, protect us," whispered the seneschal. Kal-El looked to the governor. "I must go. Your people need me." "Wait," Talius called as the being prepared to launch himself skyward. "The Imperium has protocols for such threats. The proper authorities must be notified. The Inquisition will want to interrogate you." A faint smile crossed the perfect features. "There's no time for bureaucracy when lives are at stake." With that, he was gone, leaving only a rush of displaced air. On the tactical hololiths, the operators tracked his impossible velocity as he intercepted the first wave of new attackers. 3 days later, the main Tyranid assault had been broken. Imperial Navy reinforcements arrived to find the system's space lanes clear of Xenos vessels, the bioships reduced to drifting, frozen husks. Upon the planet's surface, scattered broods of Tyranid organisms fought without cohesion, cut off from the guiding intelligence of their hive mind. Within the governor's palace, representatives from various imperial organizations had gathered: admirals from the Navy, commissars from the Astra Militarum, even a delegation from the Adeptus Mechanicus, drawn by reports of the strange being's capabilities. "The creature demonstrates power beyond documented human potential," stated Magos Tevrek, his augmetic eyes whirring as they focused. "Its velocity exceeds Warhawk pattern jet fighters. Its resilience surpasses even Astartes' physiology. It requires extensive study." "Study?" the naval commander scoffed. "It should be commended. 3 hive ships destroyed, millions of citizens saved. Whatever it is, it fights for humanity." "That remains to be proven," came a new voice. The assembled officials turned to see a slender figure in the distinctive garb of the Inquisition. Inquisitor Cardinal Varine moved with predatory grace into the chamber, her face half hidden behind an ornate mask of gold and ceramite. "Nothing stands higher than the Emperor," she continued, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Not in power, not in moral standing, not in the loyalty of imperial citizens. This being, whatever its origins, represents a grave theological threat." "With respect, Inquisitor," Governor Tullius interjected, "it saved my world when imperial forces could not arrive in time. It asks for nothing in return. It seems to embody the Emperor's own values of protection and sacrifice." Varine's augmented eyes narrowed. "Heresy begins with such seemingly innocent observations, Governor. The path to damnation is paved with rationalization." The chamber fell silent as a figure descended through an open balcony. Kal-El stepped forward, his impossible perfection somehow emphasized rather than diminished by the dirt and Tyranid ichor staining his attire. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, "but there are still civilians trapped in the eastern agricultural zones. The xenoforms have established a central nesting ground there. I've been clearing them district by district, but more coordinated assistance would save more lives." Inquisitor Varane stepped forward, her hand conspicuously near her bolt pistol. "Identify yourself, anomaly. By the authority of the God, Emperor's Holy Inquisition, you will submit to examination and interrogation." Kal-El regarded her with calm eyes. "I respect your authority, Inquisitor, but people are dying while we speak. I can hear their screams from here, thousands of them, children. Can your examination wait until they're safe?" "Nothing supersedes the security of mankind's soul," Varine replied coldly. "The physical deaths of a few thousand citizens is nothing compared to the spiritual corruption one unexamined entity might spread." For the first time, something like anger flickered across Kal-El's features. "Where I come from, every life matters. No authority is so important that it can ignore suffering." "Then you reveal your alien nature," Varine said with grim satisfaction. "In the Imperium, sacrifice is our currency. The strong must be willing to expend the weak for mankind's greater survival. The Emperor himself sacrificed thousands daily to maintain the Astronomicon. Your philosophy is not merely naive, alien, it is dangerous." Before Kal-El could respond, alarms blared throughout the palace. The tactical officer's voice came urgently through the vox. Multiple warp signatures detected. Massive translation event in progress. The hololithic display showed a new threat emerging. Not Tyranids this time, but the twisted shapes of Chaos warships, their hulls distorted by millennia in the Imperium, bristling with corrupted weaponry. "The Blood Disciples," Varane whispered, recognition in her voice. "The Tyranids were merely the prelude. This is a coordinated attack." Kal-El moved toward the balcony. "I'll intercept them." "Wait," Varane commanded. "These are not mindless Xenos. These are traitors to mankind, corrupted by the ruinous powers. Their vessels carry Chaos Space Marines, warriors twisted by warp energies. They wield weapons that can harm even beings such as yourself." "You know what I am?" "I know enough to recognize a potential catastrophe," Varane replied. "If you truly wish to help humanity, you will coordinate with Imperial forces rather than acting unilaterally." For a moment, tension hung in the air between them. Then Kal-El nodded once. "Tell me what I need to know." The briefing was brutally efficient. The Blood Disciples, a warband of Chaos Space Marines dedicated to Khorne, had likely been drawn to the system by the psychic reverberations of the Tyranid hive mind's death throes. They would seek blood and skulls, targeting civilian populations for maximum slaughter. Their leader, Vorgath the Bloodbringer, wears Terminator armor infused with warp energies, Varane explained. "He carries an axe that is said to be able to cut through reality itself. Do not underestimate him." Kal-El absorbed the information with grim determination. "I've faced beings of immense power before, gods and monsters." "Not like these," Varane warned. "The Chaos Gods are unlike anything from your realm. They feed on emotion, on belief. They can corrupt even the purest heart given time and vulnerability." For the first time, uncertainty crossed the perfect features. "I've resisted mind control before." "This is not mere mind control," Varane insisted. "This is the fundamental corruption of reality itself. The warping of physical laws and moral certainties. Even your incredible strength means nothing if your soul becomes a conduit for their influence." Aboard the lead Chaos vessel, Vorgath the Bloodbringer surveyed the tactical displays with hungry anticipation. His Terminator armor, adorned with the skulls of fallen Imperial champions, hissed and groaned with each movement, internal systems pumping combat stimulants directly into his enhanced physiology. "The planet's defenses are in disarray," reported his lieutenant, a twisted sorcerer whose armor writhed with embedded demonic entities. "The Tyranid attack weakened their orbital capabilities. We face minimal resistance." Vorgath's laughter rumbled through his vox grill. "Good. The blood god cares not from where the blood flows, only that it flows abundantly. Prepare the landing craft. I want boots on ground within the hour." "My lord," the sorcerer interjected, "our augurs detect an anomaly. Something moves between the vessels of our fleet." "Something fast." Before Vorgath could respond, the ship shuddered violently. Warning runes flashed across corrupted control panels. External pict feeds showed a blur of blue and red tearing through their escort vessels, ripping armored hulls apart with bare hands. "Impossible," the sorcerer whispered. "No mortal could survive void exposure. No human could generate such force." Vorgath's eyes narrowed behind his skull-faced helmet. Not human, then. Something else. Something worthy of Khorne's attention. The bridge rocked again as their own vessel came under attack. Armored bulkheads designed to withstand capital ship weaponry crumpled like parchment as Kal-El tore his way into the command center. Chaos Marines opened fire, bolt rounds detonating harmlessly against his chest. Vorgath raised his axe, its edge keening with warp energies. "What manner of creature are you that dares challenge the chosen of Khorne?" Kal-El regarded the corrupted space marine, taking in the grotesque mutations, the symbols of slaughter adorning his armor. "I am Kal-El of Krypton, and I won't allow you to harm the people of this world." With a roar that was half battle cry, half prayer to his dark god, Vorgath charged. His axe, Soul Render, sliced through the air where Kal-El had been standing a microsecond before. The Kryptonian moved with impossible speed, his fist connecting with the Chaos Lord's chest plate. Ceramite cracked, internal systems failed. Vorgath staggered backward, genuinely shocked. No unaugmented being should possess such strength, but the surprise quickly gave way to savage joy. Here, at last, was a worthy opponent. "Blood for the blood god," Vorgath intoned, raising his axe again, "skulls for the skull throne." This time, when he swung, Kal-El caught the blade between his palms. For an instant, they stood locked in contest, the Kryptonian's immovable strength against the chaos-infused weapon. Then, impossibly, the axe began to cut. A thin line of blood appeared on Kal-El's palm. Surprise registered on the perfect features. Pain, something he rarely experienced. The axe's edge, empowered by the ruinous powers, could harm even his Kryptonian physiology. Vorgath pressed his advantage, forcing the blade closer to Kal-El's face. "Your blood will make a fine offering," he growled. "Your skull, an honored trophy." With a burst of effort, Kal-El pushed back, his eyes flaring with heat. Twin beams of concentrated energy struck Vorgath's helmet, melting the ancient ceramite. The Chaos Lord roared in pain and rage, swinging his axe in wide, furious arcs. Across the bridge, the sorcerer began an incantation, warp energies coalescing around his outstretched hands. Reality rippled as he sought to bind the Kryptonian with chains of pure Empyrean energy. Kal-El felt the pressure of unnatural forces attempting to constrain him, not physical bonds, but something that clawed at his very essence. He broke free with a surge of effort, but the momentary distraction allowed Vorgath to strike again, the corrupted axe slicing across his chest. The legendary suit, which had withstood countless perils across multiple realities, tore under the warp-infused blade. Blood welled from the wound, startling in its vivid redness against the blue fabric. Realizing the danger, Kal-El changed tactics. Instead of meeting strength with strength, he utilized his speed, becoming a blur of motion too fast for even the enhanced senses of the Chaos Marines to track. In seconds, he had disarmed the bridge crew, shattered their weapons, and returned to face Vorgath. The Chaos Lord found his axe suddenly missing from his grasp. Kal-El held Soul Render, the corrupted weapon struggling in his grip as if alive and angry. "Your gods have no power over me," Kal-El declared, though the statement carried less certainty than it might have moments before. The wound on his chest throbbed with unnatural pain. The axe in his hand seemed to whisper promises of power, of glory. With visible effort, he snapped the weapon over his knee. The sound that followed was not the crack of breaking metal, but a scream of rage that echoed from nowhere and everywhere. The bridge lighting flickered. Blood began to weep from the eyes of the mortal crew members. Vorgath laughed, the sound distorted through his damaged helmet. "Fool, you cannot destroy that which belongs to the blood god. You have only freed its essence." The broken pieces of the axe dissolved into a crimson mist that swirled around the bridge. Where it touched bare flesh, it burned like acid, consuming the unfortunate crew members. The Chaos Marines knelt in supplication as the mist coalesced into a towering half-corporeal form. A daemon of Khorne stood before them, its body a nightmare amalgamation of muscle, brass, and constantly flowing blood. Massive horns curved from its bestial head, and in its clawed hands it held an axe that dwarfed the one Kal-El had destroyed. "Blood," it demanded, its voice causing mortal ears to bleed. "Skulls." Kal-El stood his ground as the monstrous entity focused its hatred upon him. "I've faced demons before," he said, though doubt crept into his voice. This creature was fundamentally different from the extra-dimensional entities he had encountered in his home reality. It radiated not just malevolence but wrongness, an affront to natural law. The daemon swung its massive axe. Kal-El dodged, countering with a punch that would have shattered mountains. His fist connected with the daemon's chest, displacing its form momentarily before it reconstituted. "Your strength feeds Khorne." The daemon roared with pleasure rather than pain. "Your rage empowers him." Kal-El realized with growing horror that his conventional tactics were ineffective. This was not a physical enemy that could be overpowered or outsmarted. This was a manifestation of an idea, a concept given form through the corrupted physics of the warp. The daemon pressed its attack, each swing of its axe tearing not just through air but through the fabric of reality itself. Kal-El evaded most blows, but those that connected sent waves of unnatural pain through his body. This was not just physical damage but something deeper, an assault on his very essence. As he fought, Kal-El became aware of a disturbing sensation, a whisper in his mind, growing louder with each exchange of blows. The voice promised power beyond his imagining if only he would embrace the path of Khorne. After all, did he not fight for justice? Was Khorne not the god of martial honor as well as slaughter? Kal-El faltered, the insidious logic working its way through his consciousness. In this moment of weakness, the daemon's axe caught him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing through multiple bulkheads. The Kryptonian lay amid the wreckage, blood flowing freely from wounds that should have been impossible to inflict upon him. The daemon approached, its massive form barely fitting through the breached bulkheads. "Yield," it commanded. "Serve." Something cold and terrible whispered in Kal-El's mind that perhaps this was where he belonged. This universe was harsh, brutal. Perhaps the conventional morality he had always followed was insufficient here. Perhaps power and domination were the only truths that mattered. The symbol on his chest caught his fading gaze. Hope. That was what it had meant on Krypton. Not an S for Superman as humans had mistakenly believed, but the Kryptonian symbol for hope. With tremendous effort, Kal-El rose to his feet. "No," he said simply. "I reject your god and everything he stands for." The daemon roared in frustration, raising its axe for a killing blow. But before it could strike, a new sound filled the corrupted vessel, a song, pure and terrible, that caused the daemon to shriek in pain. Sisters of Battle had boarded the vessel, their hymns to the Emperor cutting through the warp corruption like cleansing fire. Behind them came Inquisitor Varine, wielding a staff topped with a golden aquila that blazed with blinding light. "Creature of the warp," she intoned, "by the Emperor's light, I banish thee." The daemon's form wavered, its substance pulled between reality and the Imperium. It fought against the banishment, focusing its hatred on the Inquisitor. Kal-El saw his opportunity. Summoning his remaining strength, he launched himself at the distracted daemon. Instead of attacking with brute force, he grasped the daemon's substance and flew, accelerating to speeds that caused the air around them to ionize. Up through the breached hull of the ship, into the void of space. Further still, pushing his powers to their limit, Kal-El carried the struggling daemon beyond the system's gravity well, beyond the reach of its worshippers' bloody devotion. In the cold emptiness between stars, the daemon's form began to unravel without the sustaining belief and emotion of mortal minds. It thrashed and howled soundlessly in the vacuum, its substance returning to the Imperium. As the last of it dissolved, Kal-El felt the whispers in his mind fade, but the wounds remained, bleeding sluggishly in the vacuum where they should have already begun to heal. The corrupting influence of the warp had affected him more deeply than he realized. With the last of his strength, he turned back toward Hydrax Prime, a barely conscious missile falling through void and atmosphere. In the Medicae chamber of an Imperial cruiser, Kal-El awoke to the sound of chanting. Tech priests moved around his bed, monitoring arcane devices attached to his body. Servitors pumped unidentifiable fluids into his veins through crude metal needles that somehow penetrated his normally invulnerable skin. "The corruption spreads slowly," observed a tech priest, his voice devoid of emotion. "But it spreads nonetheless." Inquisitor Varine stood at the foot of the bed, her masked face unreadable. "You cannot remain here, Kal-El of Krypton. Your presence destabilizes the careful theological balance of the Imperium." Despite his weakened state, Kal-El managed to sit up, disconnecting several monitoring devices in the process. "I saved your world, I fought your enemies, and in doing so, you demonstrated power that rivals that of the Emperor himself," Varane replied coldly. Power without proper sanctioning or theological context, the masses already whisper of you as a savior. Do you understand how dangerous that is? Faith is the foundation upon which the Imperium stands. Faith in the Emperor, unquestioned and absolute. Where I come from, people are allowed to choose what they believe. Then where you come from is doomed, Varane stated flatly. In this galaxy, unity of purpose is all that stands between humanity and extinction, one faith, one ruler. Anything else invites disaster. Governor Talius entered the chamber, his face drawn with exhaustion. Inquisitor, the High Lords have reached a decision regarding our visitor. Varane turned, surprise evident in her posture if not her hidden face. So quickly, without proper examination or interrogation. The situation is unprecedented, Talius replied. As is the response. The being known as Kal-El is to be transported to Terra immediately. The Emperor himself will judge his purpose. Shock rippled through the chamber. The Emperor, entombed upon the Golden Throne for 10,000 years, communicated only rarely and cryptically through the tarot and visions granted to his most devoted servants. Direct judgment was almost unheard of. Impossible, Varane whispered. The journey alone would take months. The corruption within him would spread. Special dispensation has been granted, Talius continued. A warp jump directly to the Sol system, with a Grey Knight's escort to contain any corruption during transit. Kal-El looked between them, understanding little of the implications but grasping the gravity of the situation. This Emperor, he leads your Imperium? The question was met with horrified silence. Even suggesting that the Emperor merely led the Imperium was borderline, heretical. He was its foundation, its light, its very soul. The Emperor is mankind, Varane finally replied. He is our past and our future, our protection against the darkness of the void and the horrors of the warp. 10,000 years ago, he sacrificed his mortal form to continue his protection of humanity. He died? His physical body was mortally wounded by his traitorous son, Talius explained carefully. But his divine consciousness remains active, bound to the Golden Throne which sustains what remains of his corporeal form. From there, he projects the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon that makes warp travel possible. Without it, humanity would be isolated, divided, doomed. Kal-El absorbed this information with growing concern. And this Emperor wants to see me? Not see, Varane corrected. Judge, there is a difference. The journey to Terra was conducted under conditions of maximum security. The vessel, a specialized craft of the Inquisition, cut through the warp with unnatural speed, guided by the most skilled navigators available. Grey Knights, space marines specialized in combating demonic threats, stood constant vigil over Kal-El's chamber. Through the small viewing port in his quarters, Kal-El watched the impossible geometries of the warp pass by. The psychic maelstrom affected him differently than it did the human crew. Where they required Geller fields and constant prayer to maintain their sanity, he experienced the Imperium as a sort of dimensional overlay, similar to but far more chaotic than the phantom zone he had encountered in his home reality. The corruption from his wounds continued to spread, a network of black veins extending outward from the gashes left by the demon's axe. The ship's apothecaries and tech priests worked constantly to slow its progress, but they had never encountered Kryptonian physiology before, and their treatments were crude approximations at best. On the 7th day of transit, Kal-El was visited by the Grey Knight's chaplain, a towering figure in ornate power armor whose face remained hidden behind a skull-shaped helmet. Your corruption progresses, the chaplain observed, his voice resonating with psychic undertones. Yet you resist its influence more effectively than any mortal I have witnessed. Kal-El winced as a tech priest applied a poultice of consecrated herbs to his wound. In my world, I've been exposed to many forms of corruption, mind control, parasitic entities, poisons designed specifically to affect my biology. This is different, the chaplain stated. The touch of chaos is not merely physical or mental, it is spiritual. It corrupts the very essence of what you are. And what am I, in your understanding? The chaplain was silent for a long moment. That is not for me to determine. Only the Emperor may judge your true nature. But I observe that you possess power comparable to the Primarchs of old, yet lack their warp-infused origins. You display moral conviction that would shame many Imperial saints, yet follow no recognizable Imperial creed. You are an impossibility, a contradiction. Where I come from, I'm not the only one with powers. Kal-El explained. There are others. Some use their abilities to help people, some for selfish gains, some for destruction. And who judged which path was correct? The question gave Kal-El pause. I suppose each of us did, individually, based on our own moral compass. And therein lies the fundamental flaw of your reality, the chaplain said. Morality cannot be left to individual interpretation in a universe where gods of excess, slaughter, disease, and false hope actively corrupt the minds of mortals. The Emperor's vision provides the only safe path through such peril. Before Kal-El could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The tech priests hurriedly completed their ministrations and departed. The chaplain tilted his head, receiving information through his armor's communication systems. We are under attack, he stated calmly. A fleet of unknown origin has intercepted us despite the secrecy of our route. Our navigator reports unusual disruptions in the warp. It appears our mission was compromised. Kal-El rose from his bed, ignoring the pain that radiated from his wounds. Let me help. You are in no condition to fight, the chaplain observed, and you remain under our custody until presented to the Emperor. People are dying while we speak, Kal-El countered, echoing his earlier words to Inquisitor Varine. I can hear them. Let me help, or confine me more effectively. The chaplain considered for a moment, then nodded once. Follow me, but know that any attempt to flee will be considered confirmation of hostile intent. They made their way through corridors filled with frantic activity. Crew members rushed to battle stations. Medicae personnel prepared for casualties. The ship shuddered repeatedly as enemy fire impacted against void shields. On the bridge, a scene of controlled chaos greeted them. Tactical hololiths displayed their vessels surrounded by ships of unknown configuration, neither Imperial nor matching any known Xenos patterns. They attacked with weapons that seemed to phase in and out of reality, bypassing conventional defenses. Status report, the chaplain demanded. The ship's captain, a grim veteran of countless void engagements, responded without taking his eyes from the tactical displays. Void shields at 30% and failing. Weapons ineffective against their phase-shifting technology. They've made no attempts at communication. 3 boarding craft have attached to lower decks. Grey Knight's squad Purgator is engaging. Their configuration is unfamiliar, the chaplain noted. Not Chaos. Not Xenos of any recognized strain. Kal-El studied the hololithic images with growing dread. I recognize those ships, their Kryptonian design, but corrupted somehow. Twisted. All eyes turned to him. The captain's expression hardened. These attackers? Not specifically, but the technology, yes, it's from my world. My dead world. Inquisitor Varine stepped forward from the shadows of the bridge where she had been observing. Explain, quickly. Krypton was destroyed. I was sent away as an infant, the last survivor. But before that, there were colonies, outposts, exploration vessels. Kal-El's expression grew troubled. If some of them found their way to this reality as I did, but arrived centuries or millennia earlier, they could have established a presence, Varine concluded. One unknown to the Imperium. Unknown, or deliberately hidden, the captain suggested darkly. Further discussion was cut short as the bridge rocked violently. Warning runes flashed across control panels. The tech priests at their stations intoned binaric prayers as they fought to maintain critical systems. Lower decks breached, reported a senior officer. Grey Knights in combat with boarding parties. Enemy combatants reported as humanoid but heavily augmented. They're heading for the prisoners' quarters. They're looking for me, Kal-El realized. They must have detected my presence somehow. The chaplain's hand went to his force sword. Then they shall be disappointed. You will remain under Imperial custody. Another violent shudder ran through the ship. The lighting flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency lumens. When it stabilized, a new figure stood on the bridge, having somehow bypassed all security. The intruder resembled Kal-El in broad physical structure, but twisted by extensive cybernetic augmentation. Where the Man of Steel's appearance was one of natural perfection, this being was a grotesque marriage of Kryptonian biology and machine. Its skin had the same invulnerable quality, but was traced with metallic components that pulsed with energy. The symbol on its chest was a perverted version of Kal-El's own, the lines harsh and angular. Kal-El. The creature spoke, its voice a harmonic blend of organic and synthetic tones. Last son of Krypton, we have searched for you across realities. Grey Knights and ship security personnel surrounded the intruder, weapons trained on its position. The chaplain stepped forward, his force sword humming with psychic energy. Identify yourself, abomination, he demanded. By what right do you attack a vessel of the Holy Inquisition? The creature's gaze never left Kal-El. I am Con-El, once of the House of El, now of the Collectorate. We have come to integrate the last pure Kryptonian genetic template. The House of El? The House of El? Kal-El's expression showed shock and confusion. That's impossible. Krypton was destroyed. The bloodlines ended. In your reality, perhaps, Con-El replied. In ours, a fragment survived, adapted, evolved. We discovered the principle of dimensional transit millennia ago. We have built an empire spanning multiple realities. This one, with its unstable dimensional barriers and rich resources, is merely the latest to be targeted for integration. Inquisitor Vareen stepped forward. No empire exists in Imperial space without our knowledge. The Emperor's dominion is absolute. For the first time, Con-El acknowledged the humans around him. His augmented eyes scanned Vareen with clinical detachment. Your Emperor is known to us, he stated. A powerful psychic entity, but ultimately just another consciousness to be integrated into the Collectorate. His knowledge will serve our expansion. His genetic material will enhance our biological components. The blasphemy of these statements caused audible gasps among the crew. The Grey Knights moved as one, attacking the intruder with coordinated precision. Force weapons designed to harm daemons struck at the cybernetic Kryptonian from multiple angles. Con-El moved with inhuman speed, though lacking the fluid grace of Kal-El. His movements were efficient, calculated, machine-like. Force weapons that could cleave through demonic entities merely scraped against his hybridized flesh. Where they connected with cybernetic components, sparks flew and systems momentarily faltered, but self-repair protocols engaged almost instantly. Inefficient, Con-El observed, catching a force halberd mid-swing and shattering its adamantium haft. Your weapons are designed for entities of warp energy. I am material, evolved, perfected. With methodical precision, he disabled the Grey Knights one by one. Not killing them, Kal-El noted, but rendering them combat ineffective with precisely calculated force. A warrior race valuing efficiency above all else. The horror of what his people might have become in another reality struck him deeply. Despite his weakened condition, Kal-El launched himself at his corrupted kinsmen. Their collision shook the bridge, consoles shattering under the force of their impact. Where the Grey Knights had failed individually, Kal-El matched Con-El blow for blow. You're holding back, Con-El observed as they grappled. Limiting your force to avoid collateral damage to these humans, inefficient. Irrational. It's called compassion, Kal-El grunted, straining against the cybernetic strength that matched his own. Something our house once valued above all else. Con-El's expression remained impassive. Compassion is evolutionary baggage. We integrated its useful components, discarded the rest. The Collectorate values optimization above sentiment. They broke apart, circling each other amid the wrecked bridge. The ship's crew and surviving Grey Knights had established a perimeter, weapons trained on both Kryptonians, but unable to distinguish friend from foe at the speeds they moved. "Your wounds extend beyond the physical," Connell noted, scanning Kal-El with augmented vision. "Chaos corruption. Fascinating. We have encountered similar phenomena in other dimensions. It can be contained, studied, utilized." "Nothing about chaos should be utilized," Kal-El responded, feeling the corruption pulse within his wounds, as if responding to its mention. "It's pure evil. Evil is a subjective moral construct. The Collectorate recognizes only utility or lack thereof." Con-El's head tilted slightly. "The corruption can be removed, your genetic template purified. Join us willingly, and your transition will be optimized for comfort. And if I refuse? Then the integration will proceed regardless, but with suboptimal parameters for your consciousness retention." The cybernetic Kryptonian's voice remained flat, emotionless. "The Collectorate requires your uncorrupted genetic sequence to correct drift in our population. Your consent is preferred but not necessary." Before Kal-El could respond, a new presence made itself known on the bridge. The chaplain, who had been incapacitated earlier, rose to his feet. But something was different. His movements had a fluid grace that belied his massive armor. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated through the ship's structure itself. "Enough," he said, and the single word contained power that caused both Kryptonians to turn toward him. "The Emperor has marked this one for judgment. None shall interfere." The chaplain's eyes blazed with golden light through the eye lenses of his skull helmet. Psychic energy coruscated around his armor, forming the ghostly outline of a much larger, more magnificent figure. Connell analyzed this new development with evident caution. Possession by a warp entity. Potentially the consciousness designating itself the Emperor. Threat assessment. Significant. The possessed chaplain raised a hand wreathed in golden fire. "You trespass not merely in Imperial space, abomination, but upon the Emperor's direct attention. Begone." A wave of pure psychic force erupted from the chaplain's outstretched hand. Con-El's cybernetic system sparked and failed as the energy washed over him. For the first time, his composed features showed something approaching concern. "Unanticipated psychic capability," he stated, his voice distorting as systems attempted to compensate. "Tactical withdrawal advised." With blinding speed, Connell retreated from the bridge, smashing through bulkheads toward his boarding craft. The golden light faded from the chaplain's eyes, and he collapsed to his knees, steam rising from his overheated armor joints. "The Emperor protects," he whispered before losing consciousness. Inquisitor Varine stared at the fallen space marine with naked awe on her face. "A miracle," she breathed. "Direct intervention. I have never witnessed such a thing in all my years of service." Kal-El moved to help the fallen chaplain, but Imperial Medicae personnel waved him away, their expressions a mixture of fear and reverence as they tended to one who had briefly hosted the Emperor's consciousness. Tactical officers reported that the attacking vessels were retreating, breaking off engagement and disappearing into some form of dimensional rift rather than conventional warp transit. The immediate danger had passed, but the implications remained. "They will return," Kal-El said with certainty. "The Collectorate doesn't abandon objectives. If they're anything like the Krypton I knew, they're methodical, persistent." Varine turned to him, her earlier hostility somewhat tempered. "Then it becomes even more imperative that you reach Terra. The Emperor has demonstrated his interest in your fate. Such direct intervention has not been recorded in centuries." The remainder of the journey proceeded without further incident, though tension hung heavy throughout the vessel. Repair crews worked continuously to address the damage from the attack. The wounded were tended to. The dead were given proper rites, their gene seed harvested from the fallen Grey Knights for return to their chapter. Kal-El spent the time in meditation, focusing his incredible will on containing the chaos corruption that continued its slow spread through his body. The wound itself no longer bled, but the black veins extending from it pulsed with malevolent energy, occasionally causing him to experience visions of slaughter and destruction that grew increasingly difficult to distinguish from his own thoughts. As they approached the Sol system, he was permitted to view terror through the ship's ocular arrays. The birthplace of humanity was nothing like the Earth he had known. Where his adopted homeworld had been a blue jewel suspended in the void, this terror was a scarred, industrialized orb surrounded by a breathtaking web of orbital structures, defense platforms, and void ships. The scale of human presence dwarfed anything he had witnessed before. At the center of it all stood the Imperial Palace, a continent-spanning edifice of impossible grandeur, its highest spires reaching into low orbit. Even from space, the psychic presence emanating from it was palpable to Kal-El's enhanced senses, a golden light that penetrated the very fabric of reality. Their vessel docked at an orbital station reserved for inquisitorial craft. From there, a heavily guarded transport carried Kal-El, Inquisitor Varine, and a contingent of Grey Knights to the surface. They descended through layer upon layer of security, each more stringent than the last, until finally reaching the outer precincts of the Imperial Palace itself. What followed was a procession through corridors of such overwhelming majesty that even Kal-El, who had witnessed the wonders of countless worlds and civilizations, felt humbled. Miles of processionals lined with statues of space marines hundreds of feet tall, cathedrals where thousands of pilgrims prostrated themselves before relics of imperial saints, battlements where Titan war machines stood eternal vigil, their weapon systems humming with potential energy. At each checkpoint, Inquisitor Varane presented credentials of increasing rarity and significance. Ancient scripts were consulted, genetic samples were taken and verified. Psychic probes assessed their intentions. Finally, they reached a vast adamantium door inscribed with symbols that hurt the eye to look upon directly. Before it stood members of the Adeptus Custodes, the Emperor's personal guard, their golden armor gleaming with an inner light that spoke of technologies far beyond even the advanced systems of the Adeptus Mechanicus. "The anomaly will proceed alone from here," stated the shield captain of the Custodes, his voice resonating with authority that brooked no argument. Varine stepped forward. "With respect, shield captain, the prisoner represents a potential threat of the highest order. The protocols for such situations clearly state, the protocols are superseded by direct command." The Custodes interrupted. "He will proceed alone, or he will not proceed at all." The Grey Knights, themselves among the most elite warriors in the Imperium, stood in obvious deference to the golden-armored guardians. Even they would not challenge the Custodes within the Imperial Palace itself. Kal-El looked to Varine, who finally nodded once, her expression unreadable behind her mask. "The Emperor protects," she said simply. The massive doors swung open with impossible silence given their tremendous weight. Beyond lay a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, lined with more Custodes standing immobile as statues, their guardian spears held at perfect attention. Taking a deep breath, Kal-El stepped forward alone. The doors closed behind him with the same unnatural silence with which they had opened. The corridor extended for what seemed like miles, though distance became difficult to judge as reality itself seemed to warp subtly around him. The air grew heavy with psychic presence, pressing against his consciousness like the deepest ocean depths might press against a submersible. Finally, the corridor opened into a chamber of such vast proportions that its boundaries were lost in shadow and distance. At its center stood the Golden Throne, a massive construct of technology and psychic architecture beyond comprehension. Upon it sat what remained of the Emperor of Mankind, his physical form withered to a desiccated husk after 10 millennia of unimaginable sacrifice, yet radiating power that made Kal-El's unprecedented strength seem insignificant by comparison. Ranged around the throne were ranks of Custodes, hundreds strong, along with tech priests of the Mechanicus tending to the life support systems that sustained the Emperor's physical form. Silent sisters of the Anathema Psychana stood at strategic positions, their null presence creating pockets of psychic emptiness in the overwhelming sea of the Emperor's power. As Kal-El approached, guided by some instinct he could not name, he felt the weight of the Emperor's attention focus upon him. No words were spoken, yet communication occurred, bypassing language entirely to impress concepts directly upon his consciousness. Last son of Krypton, guardian of a dead reality, I have watched your coming with great interest. Kal-El found himself unable to speak aloud, but his thoughts formed a response that the Emperor perceived without difficulty. You know what I am? I know all that walks within the Imperium and much that lurks beyond. Your arrival was foreseen, though its meaning remained unclear until now. Images flashed through Kal-El's mind. The destruction of Krypton, his arrival on Earth, his life as both Clark Kent and Superman, his battles against forces that threatened his adopted homeworld, but also new visions, things he had never experienced, alternative paths his life might have taken, darker possibilities where his power had corrupted rather than protected. Why am I here? In this reality, this time, causality is rarely so simple, Kal-El. Perhaps you were drawn here by the same forces that guide all things. Perhaps your presence serves a purpose in the great game against the ruinous powers. Perhaps it is mere chance, though I have come to doubt the existence of such a thing. The Emperor's psychic voice carried unfathomable weariness beneath its power, the exhaustion of a being who had guided humanity through 10,000 years of constant siege against forces seeking its extinction. Unbidden, the question formed in Kal-El's mind, are you truly a god? The Emperor's response carried something that might have been amusement. I am what humanity needed me to become. Once a man, now something more and something less. Godhood is a matter of perspective, Kal-El. In your reality, were you not worshipped by some, though you denied divinity? The comparison struck uncomfortably close to home. Kal-El had always rejected any cult of personality around Superman, insisting he was merely using his abilities to help others as anyone would. Yet he could not deny that some had viewed him with religious awe, particularly in less developed regions. I never wanted worship, only to help. And therein lies the paradox that has brought you to my attention. Your power rivals that of my Primarchs, yet you lack their warp-touched nature. Your moral certainty resembles that of my greatest saints, yet you follow no imperial creed. You are an impossibility in a universe that cannot afford such contradictions. Kal-El felt the corruption in his wounds pulse in response to the Emperor's scrutiny. The black veins had spread further, now reaching his heart. Soon they would corrupt his mind as well, turning his incorruptible moral compass toward chaos. You are wounded by forces you do not comprehend, last son. The ruinous powers seek to claim you, as they seek to claim all beings of consequence. They would remake you into their champion, a corruption of all you stand for. Can you heal me? I can. But there would be a cost. There is always a cost. The Emperor's presence deepened, focusing more intently upon him. Kal-El felt as if his very soul were being examined, every moment of his existence laid bare for judgment. You stand at a crossroads, Kal-El. I offer you 3 paths. Images formed in Kal-El's mind, so vivid they seemed more real than the chamber around him. First, I can remove the corruption and return you to your reality. Your memories of this place would fade like a dream, and you would continue your existence as the guardian of your Earth. But know that your reality, like all realities, faces its own version of chaos. Without the knowledge you have gained here, you may be unprepared when those forces manifest. The vision shifted, showing an alternative future. Second, I can heal you and allow you to remain in this reality as a free agent. Your power would serve as a bulwark against both chaos and the Kryptonian collectorate that seeks you. But your very existence outside imperial hierarchy would destabilize the careful balance of faith and authority upon which mankind's survival depends. Civil wars would be fought in your name. Cults would arise claiming your patronage. Your intentions would be irrelevant against the tide of human belief. The final vision unfolded, grandest and most terrible of all. Third, I can remake you as my servant. Your power would be sanctified, your purpose aligned with the Imperium's survival. You would become a symbol of imperial might, a living saint whose very existence reinforces mankind's faith in their protector. Your freedom would be curtailed, your identity subsumed into the greater narrative of the Imperium, but your ability to save lives would be magnified 1,000-fold. The visions faded, leaving Kal-El once more aware of the immense chamber and the withered form upon the golden throne. The corruption in his wounds throbbed with increasing urgency, as if aware its time was limited. There must be another way, Kal-El thought. A compromise that preserves both my autonomy and this reality's stability. The luxury of perfect solutions died with old Earth, Kal-El. In this universe, Alabama L choices carry blood price. All victories are partial, all defeats absolute. Kal-El considered each option carefully, returned to his reality where he was needed, but without the knowledge to combat chaos when it inevitably manifested there. Remain free in this reality, but become an unwitting catalyst for civil war and religious strife. Or surrender his autonomy to serve the Emperor's vision, becoming a tool of an Imperium whose methods often contradicted everything he stood for. None were ideal. All required sacrifice. As he deliberated, he became aware of another presence within the Emperor's psychic projection, not separate, but a facet of the whole. A lingering remnant of the man the Emperor had been before his internment upon the Golden Throne. This aspect watched Kal-El with something approaching compassion, an emotion nearly foreign in the grim calculus of the 41st millennium. This choice defines not merely your fate, Kal-El, but potentially the course of multiple realities. The Collectorate will not cease its pursuit. Chaos will not abandon its claim upon your soul. My Imperium cannot tolerate an unaligned power of your magnitude. There are no innocent options remaining to you. In that moment, with perfect clarity, Kal-El understood the weight that the Emperor had carried for 10 millennia. The impossible choices, the necessary compromises, the sacrifices of principle in service to survival. He had always judged such moral concessions harshly from the comfortable perspective of a more forgiving reality. If I choose to serve, he thought carefully, what guarantees do I have that my power won't be misused, that I won't be ordered to commit atrocities in the name of imperial security? Guarantees are for realities with the luxury of certainty, last son. I can offer only this. My vision for humanity has always been one of elevation, not mere survival. The cruelties of the Imperium are necessities I would unmake if circumstances allowed. Perhaps, Wisconsin your power added to mine, such reform becomes possible in time. It was not the reassurance Kal-El had hoped for, but it carried the ring of truth. The Emperor offered no false promises, no easy absolution. For the first time since arriving in this harsh reality, Kal-El truly understood its fundamental difference from his own. His Earth had been a place where individual heroism could change the course of history, where moral compromise was rarely necessary, where the light always eventually triumphed over darkness. This universe offered no such comforts. Here, the best intentions paved roads to damnation. Here, victory was measured not in lives saved, but in humanity's continued existence against forces that sought its utter annihilation. Could he judge the methods of those fighting such a war? Could he maintain his moral certainty when faced with threats that rendered conventional ethics not just naive but actively dangerous? The corruption pulsed again, sending waves of pain through his body. Time was running short. A decision had to be made. In the end, it came down to the fundamental question that had always guided him across every reality and incarnation: how could he best serve life? I choose the third path, he communicated finally. Not because I agree with everything the Imperium stands for, but because I can do the most good within its structure rather than against it. The Emperor's presence seemed to expand, filling the vast chamber with golden light that penetrated to Kal-El's very core. So be it. Kaniel, Louisiana STSON of Krypton, and rise as the Emperor's shield. Kal-El knelt before the golden throne, his head bowed. The Emperor's psychic power engulfed him, burning away the chaos corruption with cleansing fire that seared not just his flesh but his very soul. The pain was beyond anything he had ever experienced, yet he did not cry out. As the corruption was purged, he felt something else taking its place. Not control or domination, but a connection. A purpose aligned with but not subsumed by the Emperor's own. His powers remained his own, but now they were sanctified, recognized within the theological framework of the Imperium. When he rose, he was changed. His costume, torn and bloodied from battle, had been transformed. The blue became the deep cobalt of Space Marine armor, the red the rich crimson of the Adeptus Custodes. The symbol on his chest remained, but was now incorporated into the Imperial Aquila, the stylized double-headed eagle that represented the Imperium of man. You are now my shield against the darkness, Kal-El. Neither Primarch nor Space Marine, but a category unto yourself. The Collectorate will come. Chaos will scheme. You will stand against both in my name. I will not kill unnecessarily, Kal-El stated, establishing his boundaries even as he accepted his new role. I will show mercy where possible. I will protect the innocent above all else, as you should. Mankind requires not merely protection but inspiration. You will be both shield and beacon. With these final words, the Emperor's direct presence receded, though the connection remained, a golden thread linking Kal-El's consciousness to the master of mankind. The chamber returned to its previous state, the custodes and tech priests resuming their silent vigil. The shield captain approached, inclining his head slightly in acknowledgement of Kal-El's new status. The audience is concluded. You will be escorted to the Sanctorum Imperialis for formal investiture and instruction in your duties. As Kal-El followed the custodes from the throne room, he felt the weight of his decision settle upon him. He had sacrificed the possibility of returning to his own reality, committed himself to serving an empire whose methods he did not fully endorse, in hopes of guiding it toward a more compassionate future. In the vast Gothic corridors of the Imperial Palace, he caught sight of his reflection in a polished adamantium surface. The symbol of hope from Krypton, now incorporated into the Imperial Aquila, a compromise, like everything in this universe. Not perfect, but perhaps necessary. Outside, beyond the armored walls and void shields, beyond the orbital defense platforms and patrolling fleets, the stars waited. Among them, the forces of chaos gathered, sensing the emergence of a new player in the great game. The Kryptonian Collectorate calculated, analyzed, prepared for their next attempt to capture the last pure genetic template of their species. And on Terra, the Emperor watched through golden eyes as his newest champion prepared to face them all, a last son of a dead world now bound to the fate of humanity's desperate empire. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there was only war, a new light had kindled. Whether it would prove salvation or merely another noble sacrifice upon the altar of human survival remained to be seen. In the Sanctorum Imperialis, surrounded by the greatest heroes and darkest secrets of the Imperium, Kal-El of Krypton knelt once more as the High Lords of Terra proclaimed his new title before the assembled masses. "Behold," intoned the Master of the Administratum, his voice amplified to reach the countless thousands gathered in the processional, the shield of the Emperor, sanctified son of Terra, protector of mankind. The masses chanted their devotion, their faith strengthening the Emperor's light throughout the Imperium. And in the shadows between stars, entities of immense malevolence turned their attention toward this new development, sensing both opportunity and threat in the last Kryptonian sanctification. The great game continued, the war eternal raged on, and Superman, once the bright champion of a more hopeful universe, took his place among the grim defenders of mankind's twilight empire, carrying the symbol of hope into a reality that had all but forgotten its meaning.